Hi, welcome back. This is Jonathan. Welcome to the Haystack. Today, I wanted to go over a video that came out not too long ago. My brother sent it to me, and it's by a bunch of people who kind of stuff. They use the name Exmo, right? So these are people who have disaffected away from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they spend their time um, digging up things, evidences, and issues and just various attacks against the church. All right, so I was sent one of their videos, and it had to do with the education of Joseph Smith. That in our scriptures we go over and uh, in the history of the church and Joseph Smith, it's traditionally known that he had no more than a third grade general or standard education. So that was the official education he's received is about 3 years worth, which during that time is kind of common. But one thing we know about Joseph Smith is he valued knowledge, he valued information, he valued all these things, right? So, um, what they talk about is him and his connection to Dartmouth College. Now, that's how it kind of starts off, but it's a little bit misleading. Um, so, there's the Moores Indian College, which is kind of like a preparatory school, um, teaches uh, Christian values and missionary stuff with the and how to communicate that with Indians and learning of their history. So they're saying that all the things combined with View of the Hebrews, all these various other things that existed just prior to this time or at this time that he may or may not have had access to were all things that went into him getting the idea to make up the Book of Mormon out of his own head, which is not true. So their argument is that Hiram attended the Moores Indian College, which is like a companion school next to Dartmouth. And it's important to note that Dartmouth didn't carry the same prestige it does today. However, in these small towns, I mean, this is a new nation, fairly new nation. Um, what you end up having is a small town politics and biases and things like that. So a college or a school in a town would be a big deal, but not as big of a deal as it is today. The thing here is this also was during the time when Joseph, their family had just moved, uh, and they lived in the proximity of Dartmouth College. And this is actually why when he had, man, I was saying it earlier today, when he got sick, typhoid fever. There we go. So when he had typhoid fever and it had gone into his leg and created a huge infection in the bone, this was um, the only place geographically in the world where there is a doctor who had an experimental idea of how to treat this without amputation. Right. So this connection with him in Dartmouth stems from that. And I can't remember the doctor's name. I know it's his last name is Smith as well. From what I understand, there's no relation, but I think there's like distant relation throughout the area, which isn't surprising because most of the new colonials, all the colonials, these people in this new nation, I mean, they're all intermarried and grouped up together. It's a huge family. So having a distant cousin or relative or saying somebody's connected to somebody, that's pretty common. Um, so just putting that aside, This website, these people against the church are saying that because Hiram went and attended this school and would come back and tell Joseph about it at night, this is where Joseph got his ideas and his storytelling and charisma, and it's no longer that Joseph was stupid or anything, but that he was a genius. He was a bona fide genius, and when other kids would be going out and doing stupid things and getting attention, that Joseph Smith was studying and learning. He was gaining understanding of things. So they said that he was just a genius. So they say the fallacies that the church promotes is how Lucy Mack Smith, his Joseph's mother, would say that Joseph Smith couldn't, uh, you know, put out a well worded letter, right? Um, but again, we've seen lots of letters from Joseph Smith, and they seem far more, structurally sound and eloquent and more put together than what today's educational system, produces. Um, so now, so these are some good things, some positive attributes that they're saying about Joseph, and and that he gathered this information about Native Americans and the theology and Christianity and combined that into storytelling. And this is old theory. There's books out there of how the Native Americans were the 10 lost tribes. Um, Saints Unscripted does a great job going through each of these little points and actually addressing them. And so I'd refer you there if you want to go and do that. But I'm assuming most of you already know all this. But when it comes right down to it, the the calling of a prophet, prophets are prepared when they're called. When I was a missionary, I was up in Idaho Falls, and I think we had to go down to, maybe it was Idaho Falls, but maybe Brigham City, or not, Bingham. There we go. But Elder Bettner came and spoke with us. I had the opportunity to ask him a question. I think I covered that in another video. But he talked a long time. There's a couple specific things which he talked about. One of those was the calling of prophets, which I think was just as much for the general authority, that 70 that was companion to him on this visit, as much as it was to us. So he talked about the callings of prophets, the preparation that they go through, and how revelation is received and all that. And that was just wonderful. Um, and everything I've learned about prophets is that they are prepared to serve the very purpose which the Lord has called them to. And so we don't go and say, well, Joseph in Egypt, uh, like, he wasn't really a like, what is wrong with the Lord calling and preparing people through knowledge? Because Joseph Smith, obviously, he had an interest in these things. He's down and sick for I forget how long, but on a bed with typhoid fever and then healing from the surgery. And we're to believe that in this time, he took the opportunity to filthy up his character and to divine some stories to mislead people that is completely contradictory to what is true. I don't think that's true. Um, There's so many people who attack Joseph Smith's character, but this is also coming from the very people who murdered him. It's coming from the very people who just hate, right? And I think too often Latter day Saints get caught up listening to the naysayers and looking for any flaw rather than actually looking at things contextually. So if we look at Joseph Smith, his mind, yeah, he's humbled. He's bedridden. He's waiting for his brother to come home from a prestigious school, and he's learning all he can about those people. Because I mean, any person down and out on economically back then, they're going to share as much knowledge as they possibly can with the rest of their family because they know that they can't send their entire family to school. In fact, I was wondering, like, how would this have even happened? Did it cost the Smiths money for the surgery? Or because this was such a significant surgery and it was a breakthrough operation where even other medical students came and observed, did this kind of grant any kind of opportunity for the Smiths to say, look, Joseph is, he's not going to be able to work with us. Is there any way that we can send one of our sons to the school where you came from and to learn as much as possible and maybe get him set on a better life? And I can imagine that the surgeon probably goes, well, I don't think I have the say so to do that. I could probably convince them to let you audit some classes, but you can't walk away with a 4-year degree. And that's actually what we end up seeing is Hiram Smith attended this school for 4 years. And we have records, secondhand records from schoolmates, but I don't think he was ever on a registry. I didn't see that anywhere, and maybe I missed it, but I don't think I did. But that's the situation. So maybe he didn't get a 4-year certificate. He just attended for 4 years as part of a thank you for letting us test this operation and promoting our school. But at the same time, a certificate from our school is pretty has some weight to it. Now that we are a prestigious school, and I don't think the Smiths would go on bragging about this 4-year education if there's no certificate to back it up, because then the early naysayers of the Book of Mormon would just go and claim like he's lying. There's nothing about it. In fact, if that was a claim, then we simply would have a completely different dialogue saying, well, if he did it to copy the Book of Mormon, but he didn't, which means he's a liar. There's no certificate, there's no proof of it. Right. And the Smiths are probably looking at the more immediate kind of issue. They're not gonna tout a 4-year degree education without a degree. So I mean that's my thinking there. And when it comes to Lucy Mack Smith saying Joseph not writing very well letter, yeah, I've got a mom too. And she tries to paint the best light on me as possible. And I think this is what we see. And I know often my mother has told me characteristics about myself that I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? But she's recalling a memory of me being 4 years old, 2 years old. And she's like, oh, you're smart. But that's something she developed when I was 2. Or, oh, you just like climbing on things, climbing all over. I can go 13 years without climbing on something as soon as I climb up on a rock. Oh, yeah, you're a climber. So you gotta take it from a mother, right? Not only that, I mean, I had what Homeland Security doing a federal background check on me in a few years back, And they called my mom and trying to verify if that was really her. And they asked, Do you know Jonathan?" And she's like, "Nope, never heard of him. Don't know him." Hung up. Uh, she called me and let me know. I'm like, "No, mom, you gotta tell. It's my background check." She's like, "You didn't tell me." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't tell you everything, but just please, you gotta cooperate with them. Help me out here, man." Um, so that's where I see that. And with Joseph, of course, he is bedridden. He's bored. All he has is most likely the King James Bible, which includes parts of the Apocrypha. And so he's probably learning to read at a very early age. They probably don't have paper and all that stuff for handwriting and practicing um, as often, but I'm sure he wrote things down. I'm sure he learned. But this is the very structure of how prophets are prepared. Even Jesus Christ learned line upon line and precept on precept and grew in strength and stature. It's the same thing for every single one of our prophets. They were prepared. There are circumstances they encountered that gave them the ability to be compatible and comprehend what would be taught by the Lord through revelation. This is why we're taught to read from the best books. And when we have a wide spectrum of understanding and we just can discern truth from untruth, we can still get the context, the understanding, and it gives the Spirit far more to work with when we're seeking revelation because they're pulling off of things that we already know. And it has to be something that we're seeking and we're reflecting on. There could be no better preparation than Hiram coming back from school and telling Joseph in the evenings all of this stuff that he learned that day. And Joseph just, you know, maybe he's learning to write it down or maybe he's trying to read his brother's notes. But then the whole next day when he's at home alone in that bed, what's he doing? He's thinking about that stuff. He's remembering. He's trying to gain some form of greater understanding. And he daydreams. Yeah, no problem. He daydreams. But this, reflecting on a subject and studying and seeking and praying, that invites revelation and being able to discern truth from untruth. I don't think the Lord just grabs a person and says, "Hey, I'm downloading all truth and knowledge of the universe into your head that will be accepted in every time and generation throughout history. And you will be perfect from here on out." That's not the way it works yet. In some form or fashion, this is apparently the way many people do think, is that a prophet is somehow infallible. Now, the thing is the prophet serves his purpose, and if he makes a mistake, he certainly corrects it. But Joseph in Egypt was prepared to serve and do everything um, to preserve the Israelites. His father taught him Egyptian, and that sustained him. He was sold into slavery. His knowledgeable attributes, his intelligence was valued. You might go, well, why didn't they use surely the Egyptians, who were masterful in many things, they could have done without Joseph, just the same way in Joseph Smith's day. Someone might ask, why doesn't a learned person, someone, if they all they need to do is reflect on these things, then obviously use a professor? Well, this is where character comes in. Character is absolutely needed. And how I know when I'm being fed bad information about Joseph Smith's character is looking at him with that typhoid fever and enduring that type of situation and his care for his mother. That type of character is not easily driven away. especially if he had so much information and knowledge to strengthen that. This is how I know when I'm being fed false or misleading things, that Joseph Smith does not have the character of a con artist. Does he have the qualities and attributes? Possibly. Con artists are successful because they have good attributes. What they have is a nasty motive and character. That is not Joseph Smith. He served the Lord. Joseph in Egypt served the Lord. Moses served the Lord. Think of Moses' situation. The same thing could have been said of either Joseph or Moses. In fact, Joseph, they said, oh, all he does is learn. He's lazy. He doesn't work, right? They said the same thing about Joseph Smith. He's not a hardworking farmer. And no, he's not out there 24/7, hauling hay. But he did oddball jobs and did manual labor, the same as most people. But of course, if there's opportunity to do other things, he was doing other things. Moses, he has to flee Egypt because he kills a guard. Now, the thing there, you look at contextually what the situation is there. We know that he can't return until all the men which wanted him dead are gone, right? All the men. That suggests multiple. And during this time period, there's a lack of stabilization in the Egyptian kingdom. But Moses, growing up in the elite, area, being able to learn at the temple and probably exercise some type of positions, he probably wasn't not likely in the line to be a pharaoh, but it must have been somewhere in that court where he had training and everything. So I think he had some kind of possibility as a threat to a future king. The way I think about this is he's Shemitic and he's associated with the Hyksos, even though he was raised in the king's household. But we have a new form of Nubian pharaohs coming through. And they look at Moses and they go, he's one of those Hyksos. He's one of those shepherd people. Israelites and the Hyksos were combined together, and they're just seen as, people who are taking our jobs. They're taking our gerbs. So, and so he probably did something no different than anyone else in his position would have done, but he just wasn't professional or because they're looking for a reason to get rid of him. Maybe he did something that was customly, you know, done, but not done by policy. If you catch my drift, working in government, you see a lot of stuff like that, and so he uses some of his Egyptian moves, kills a guard, realizes he's kind of sabotaged himself. You kill a guard, that's a threat to whoever the pharaoh is. They can articulate anything they want. So he dips. He goes out into Canaan, right? But the Lord brings him back after these people are dead, right? Not because he's the most righteous or perfect person, not because of any of that, but because of his position, what he's gained, learned, and because of his character and his humility to endure these things. Think about it. He grew up studying in the household of Pharaoh and in the temples. And a lot of what we see the Israelites take, people say the Israelites just stole that from the Egyptians. And that's what they say about Joe Smith. Oh, he stole that from the Templars. Where did the Templars get it? Got from Israel. Where did Israel get it? Get it from Egypt. Right? But what it was is there's a core, a kernel of accurate, true ordinances, which have been patched together, changed, and you know restored, repaired, changed, altered, customized for whatever culture and group. It goes from a Melchizedek order down to an Aaronic order with Moses. And so we don't really see that with the Israelites. And so when we see a restoration and they're saying, oh, Joseph Smith stole all this stuff from the Templar Knights, or not the Templar Knights, the Freemasons. Where do you think the Freemasons got it? Furthest back we could track is down to Egypt. Before that, we see elements of this in older civilizations, but not quite the same. If you were to take two exact cars, but one is actually restored to its original state, maybe customized to fit the modern laws, exhaustion laws, or carbon laws, whatever it is, maybe put in some modern elements into it. It's still the same car restored, but there's a few differences. It's going to resemble a car that has changed hands thousands of times, has gone through various restorations and changes in projects and parts being taken out, replaced, and ultimately what you end up getting is a completely different car, completely different everything, but it was all just built on at different times. So it'll resemble the true car that's restored, but it's not going to be exactly the same. It's the same thing with the gospel. It's the same thing with our temple ordinances. Now, Freemasons, they had information, they preserved it for a time when further truth and light would be brought forth. That time's occurred. And so we have these naysayers who are using these things and saying, well, Joseph Smith he's a con artist. No, he's obviously a prophet and has followed the same pattern as many other prophets, and was prepared and had his mind honed in to what he needed to focus on. His desires set in a pattern of study and a love for scripture and knowledge. And this is manifested in everything that he's brought forth, the fruits that have come forth from that. Anyways, I shared that video with Jody Stoddard with Joseph Smith Foundation to see if she wants to make a response or at least be prepared, because I think there's some saints that may be shaken. President Nelson did say we need to be spiritually prepared. And this is just one of those things. All right. Hope you enjoyed this. Sorry this is short. Take care, everyone.